понизата препораки на Брисел во давањето од зелено светло за старт на преговори со Европската Унија, Северна Македонија и оваа година нема да ги започне преговорите, односно нема да се одржи првата меѓувладина конференција помеѓу Северна Македонија и Европската Унија. Амбасадоре, пред речиси една година констатирате корупцијата е состојба на умот. Како денес ви изгледа состојбата во Северна Македонија? Гледате ли некаков напредок и во кои области?
When I had just arrived here, I compared corruption with a ship that is making water. Of course, it was immediately reported in the press that I compared North Macedonia to a sinking ship. I did not. Said, if you have a ship that makes water, you have to do two things. You have to plug the holes and you have to start pumping. Plugging the holes means you have to make the legal loopholes go away that enable corruption. You have to adopt new laws to prevent corruption. And pumping means you have to go after those who are corrupt and bring them into court. In both respects, this country is making progress. A lot of the necessary legislation that has to combat corruption has been adopted. There is now a state committee for anti-corruption measures. There is a vice prime minister to combat corruption. But also the sense in the governmental structures, in the judiciary, is growing that this is a problem. So yes, there has been progress, step by step, but the state of mind, it is of course extremely difficult for people who have grown up in a culture of corruption to be the only parent who doesn't bring presents to the teacher of their children. It is very difficult to be the only person not to bring a present to the doctor when you have an appointment. That is, if everybody else does it, then it becomes very hard to be the exception. But also here, I think the understanding is growing for what needs to be done, and it is important to keep targeting young people, students in the schools, to make this awareness grow. But also in that field, I see progress. It will be long and difficult, and it will be step by step, but it is possible to do.
Амбасадоре, неодамна имаше објавено едно истражување со помалку парадоксални податоци. Граѓаните му веруваат на претседателот на државата Стево Пендаровски и на армијата, меѓутоа не веруваат во владата, во институциите. Има уште еден парадоксален податок, а тоа е следен. И покрај тоа што постојано се пролонгира давањето зелено светло за старт на преговорите со Европската Унија, сепак граѓаните се уште веруваат дека перспективата на земјата е во европското семејство. Како вие гледате на?
I don't see any paradoxes. To take the first, both the president and the armed forces are branches of the government, of the state, together with all the other state institutions. If you take the army, since March last year, this country is a member of NATO, and Minister Šekerinska has now aligned the armed forces of this country with the military requirements in NATO. That is really in record time. She has done this extremely quickly. So that is the government making sure the army can function well in the new NATO circumstances. So there's no paradox there. The other one, trust in the EU is growing. I'm glad the population recognizes the enormous solidarity and support that was always there. It is maybe opposition, maybe the media that for some time has blamed the EU for the lack of progress. In reality, there has been massive support over the years from the EU for this country, massive solidarity, and on top of that, during Corona times, this was increased with hundreds of millions of euros. The EU alone has provided 800,000 vaccines, more than anybody else. Individual member states have provided vaccines, all for free, all for free. This country has bought vaccines in China and in other countries. But from us, you got them for free. And on top of that, there has been a lot of financial support, not only for the health systems during the whole corona crisis, also for the economic and social fallout, and even direct budget support. So the image that has been painted by some that somehow the EU was abandoning North Macedonia, in my eyes, is completely ridiculous. The support is there, the solidarity is there, and will remain to be there.
Амбасадоре, Холандија, како и голем број на земји членки на Европската Унија, ја заговараат тезата дека преговорите меѓу Скопје и Софија не смеат да бидат пречка за почеток на преговори на Северна Македонија со Европската Унија. Со сличен став неодамна во Скопје излезе и холандскиот премиер Марк Руте, кој оцени дека преговорите меѓу Скопје и Софија не смеат да бидат пречка за старт на преговори со Европската Унија. Вие, меѓу другото, во јануари ќе речете, не драматизирате со Бугарија. Колку ваквите бугарски позиции се во спротивност со европските политики и пракси?
The thing is that over the past months it has become completely clear that in Europe Bulgaria is on its own. Nobody shares the position of Bulgaria. 26 member states think this country is ready to start negotiations. So that this problem still exists is a problem between North Macedonia and Bulgaria, but also in the past few months you have seen the pressure on Bulgaria growing. In my view, still, it shouldn't be made into a drama. Why? Because our aim, your strategic aim, is not the start of the negotiations. Your strategic aim is the end of the negotiations. The end of the negotiations in a couple of years when you actually become a member of the European Union. That agenda is very clear. It's very clear what needs to be done in the 34 chapters that need to be negotiated. The road ahead is clear. It is clear what this country has already done, and it is clear what still needs to be done. This agenda will be backed up by the European Union and its member states. And when exactly this IGC takes place, the formal start of the negotiations, has no real significance for the changes that need to take place on the ground. And so in my view, whether the difficulties with Bulgaria, which I really see only as a small bump in the road, will be resolved in a week or in a month or in a year, has no impact on the homework that this country has to do, so that we will be able in a couple of years to welcome you in the family, to welcome you at the table with the same rights and the same obligations as all the other member states, which will also include the kind of veto rights Bulgaria has right now. But in light of the important reforms that have to take place, I still think you shouldn't make a drama out of Bulgaria. It's for the large goal which is membership of the European Union. The Bulgarian problem will someday be resolved. But the end goal, that is what I think this country should keep before its eyes and keep working towards.
Во време на длабока политичка криза, ден пред гласањето во собранието, иницирано од опозицијата за доверба на владата, во земјава беше холандскиот премиер Руте. Посетата на Руте коинцидираше и со помалку симптоматичното исчезнување на македонскиот пратеник Реджепи, кој за волја на вистината одреден период работеше и во холандската амбасада. Во дел од политичките кулуари се шпекулираше дека холандската амбасада всушност го има привремено засолнето македонскиот пратеник. Прашањето ми е, изгледа помалку симптоматично што речиси 24 часа нема македонски пратеник.
A visit like that of my prime minister takes months to prepare. So the start of the preparations for this visit started long before the local elections. Then, of course, there were these political developments after the second round of the local elections. Of course, for a while it was not completely certain that the visit should take place, but it took place and it was positive for us, it was positive for North Macedonia, I think. But of course, it had nothing to do with the political situation as it occurred at that moment. And to spread rumors like that, I think, is malicious. It is a sign of that everything in this country is immediately turned into a conspiracy theory, which is laughable. But those who spread the rumors are, it's malicious. I think the media who report them are not professional. And I think the people who believe this kind of nonsense should take a second and reflect on how logical this all is.
Амбасадоре, каде го гледате излезот од можноста да се постигне договор меѓу Скопје и Софија? Веќе 2,5 години сте во земјата. Дали имате чувство или можеби впечаток дека во Македонија се создава некакво антибугарско расположение и говор на омраза кон Бугарија?
I think there are all kinds of solutions, but it's not up to us. It's between you and Bulgaria. And I think whatever people are saying, whatever their positions are, one really change in the past few days is that there is a new government in Sofia. And you have seen some positive messages coming out of Sofia from the new Prime Minister Petkov. That is, I think, a basis to work on. And of course, in the last European summit in October, it was clear that Bulgaria was alone, as I said, but also that the pressure is increasing on Bulgaria. It is a bilateral problem that has nothing to do with the negotiating framework between North Macedonia and the European Union. In the meantime, what we want is, in the end, prosperity and stability on the Balkans. And for that, we would like you to be both in NATO and in the European Union. And the longer it takes to achieve that, the less we like it. So yes, that is the kind of pressure on Bulgaria. But the essence of the problems you have with Bulgaria are not for us. So I still think it shouldn't be made into something bigger than it is. I also think that with the present new government in Bulgaria, there are all kinds of opportunities to explore ways to resolve this issue. But your question was about the popularity of Bulgaria in this country. Yeah, it has an effect, of course, on people. They're not making themselves more popular, that is clear. And also, and that is what you have to keep in mind, the question of the start of the IGC for North Macedonia is linked to the start of the IGC for Albania. So in weighing proposals and questions and ideas, you have to keep in mind that there is the link with the Albanian issue.
Многумина велат, отворен Балкан може, но и не смее да биде алтернатива за членството на земјите од Западен Балкан кон Европската Унија. Дали отворен Балкан во моментов е проект кој може да биде некаква замена привремена се до зачленувањето на земјите од регионот кон Европската Унија?
As I said, our goal is stability and prosperity on the Balkans, which means that in the end we want you in NATO and in the EU, all of you. If you look at the last EU progress reports, then you see that North Macedonia is doing very well compared to the others. Another reason to be optimistic about the speed with which North Macedonia will be able to do the reforms it needs to do. In the meantime, we encourage any regional cooperations. This region is, of course, not tension-free. If you look at the other countries, so any improvement in cooperation we welcome. In the meantime, we will very closely watch whether the agreements that are made in the framework of the Open Balkans are in alignment with EU regulations. Because in the end, the goal is for North Macedonia to align all its laws and regulations with the EU. And once in a while, we come across rules and regulations and laws that are not in conformity. So we ask the government to change. And this will be, in the coming years, a continuous process. The government will identify areas where the rules need to change to bring them in line with EU legislation. Open Balkans is no different. If you agree with your friends in the region, if you agree on regulations that can at some point be seamlessly incorporated in what the EU does, that is great. If we spot at some point that there is a discrepancy between what you agree with your friends and what we need to have in the end, then we will mention it and we will ask governments to correct that.
Амбасадоре, пред преседавањето на Франција со Европската Унија, председателот Макрон излезе со иницијатива, цитирам, проект Историја на Европа, поточно тестира идеја за ревидирање на европската историја. Дали ова упатува на контраверзите, на одредени контраверзии во европската историја?
A real understanding of history, and I don't really want to comment on the French president, but a real understanding of history has to become by accepting facts for every people, both the triumphs and the great things, along with the black pages. And every country has black pages in its history. But of course, on the Balkans, this is not easy. The view on history is pretty fragmented. Every part of the Balkans has its own view on what the facts are. Certainly in a country where a quarter of the population is of a different ethnic constellation, of a different religion, the view on what the facts of history are difficult to agree on. But yeah, an understanding of history is very important, but looking towards the future is much more important. And that is what has to happen here. People should not wait until somebody else makes their decisions. They should determine their own future and they should become masters of their own destiny.
Велите, историјата е факт која не смее и не може да се менува, но треба да се фокусираме кон иднината. Дали сме заробеници на минатото?
Yes, history should be known. History should be incorporated in every personal life, but you don't want to get stuck in it when you think about where this country should go further. And you shouldn't be too shackled, too chained by your history. But the first step is, of course, to agree on what the history really is. And you see too often in this country, to my taste, that when one politician says nice weather, the other writes it down to use it against him when it rains.
Амбасадоре, се чини дека Северна Македонија е во перманентна некаква криза, политичка, економска, социјална, енергетска криза. Имаме криза на морални вредности. Гледате ли потреба, можеби, за освежување на политичката сцена во земјава.
This is, I think, part of the Balkan dramatization. There is no crisis. What crisis? Take energy, for instance. Yes, there is, the prices are rising, but they are rising everywhere in Europe, not only in this country. This is, there's also, it is healthy to look more at this country in comparison to others. I think the citizens in my country are paying 2-3 times more for their energy now. The price rise in this country, where energy is still also subsidized, is what, maybe 15%? So I wouldn't call it a crisis. The market is at this moment difficult and distorted, but it is not a crisis. The problems in this country are manageable. It is not a very large country. Economically, North Macedonia is doing relatively well in the region, but also in the whole of Europe. There are lots of countries much harder hit by Corona than North Macedonia. So economically it's strong. The currency has been stable for a very long time and still is stable. Government debt has not grown very much it has grown of course during Corona, but not to levels where we should get panicked. So the political crisis, I don't see it. There were local elections, not national elections, and some of the political balance has shifted. But the underlying problems that the country needs to solve are exactly the same before and after the local elections. And then the moral crisis. I meet a lot of young, enthusiastic people, well educated, who have a trust in the future of this country. So the moral crisis, the only moral crisis I can see is this feeling of despondency I very often encounter. The feeling that somehow the people of this country cannot solve their problems by themselves. And in the end, you will have to solve the problems by yourself. It's your future. And, but I also think you are able to do that. I'm pretty optimistic. The problems in this country are manageable, and you will get there step by step. So, crisis, I don't see it.
In the end, I would like to wish you a Merry Christmas and
thank you very much.
Happy
You
New
too.
Year. I hope that you will here in Skopje for the New Year with the whole family.
My family will come here for Christmas.
All the best.
Because this is a very nice country to be in.
Ви благодарам, тоа беше амбасадорот на Холандија во Република Северна Македонија Дирк Јан Коп.